Augie, so your mom and dad came back to Halifax, and the era that the '60s and the '70s was quite a divisive era in a number of different ways. Um, and obviously, they were living through some of the things that were happening, politically and socially in the environment and kind of the climate around them. And so I'm just wondering, from your perspective, like coming back to Halifax and having gone through some of the things that you described um, in terms of life up to that point, how did that impact them, coming back to Halifax?
Yeah, I think about, and Drew, I think about a story actually. I'm going to go ahead to go back. When I was at my dad's funeral, and Noel Knockwood's there, and Danny Paul is there. It's tweet grass is being burned, and there's people from the justice, people who were homeless, people that were incarcerated. And the amount of people that are coming up to me as the oldest son and saying, your dad really supported me. And it was at that moment I had a serious epiphany. So I understood what civil rights meant at that time. And this is like 10 years ago, and I realized that as an English teacher in semantics, civil rights are rights of civilians. Rights of civilians. So when you start to take that lens, and then my parents coming back to Nova Scotia, this is great to have this conversation in a justice environment, because at the time there were rules and laws and legislation that were discriminatory. They were that you had to do. You know what I mean? So justice is a fluid thing, and laws are a fluid thing, and they often get changed when people challenge them. And so, whenever you see a group of people become empowered, they will start to challenge the lack of citizenship. So, if you pay taxes, by the time you leave your home, you should be able to go to safe spaces in grocery stores, walk in the street, when you go to school, when your kids go to school. They're supposed to be safe spaces to live and grow and learn and be respected as a human being, as a civilian. And so civil rights, and I bring it to that point because as my parents come back to Nova Scotia, civil rights may come off as a Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Malcolm X situation. What I think happened with my parents was coming from, the energy of my mom being the intellectual piece, I think of that partnership, and dad being the articulate, charismatic piece. And not to say my mom didn't have charisma, not to say my dad wasn't intelligent, but there was a partnership. And so when they come back to a Halifax in Nova Scotia, where the last segregated school in black segregated school in the country is Lincolnville, 1984. That's yesterday.
Yeah.
So think about coming back to Nova Scotia in the late 60s, early 70s. There's a lot of inequities, a lot of places you can't go, a lot of places where there's overt discrimination and overt racism. And, you live day to day, but I think once somebody stands up to do the work, and it's not only Joan Rocky, there's a lot of people. But I do think that you often have leaders and energetic people that are able to take that first step, push things open, and then other people come and join you in that. So I say coming back to Nova Scotia and organizing, it's interesting when you want to subjugate a people, don't let them organize. Don't let them meet. Don't let them talk. Don't let them share stories. That's beautifully, because that precipitates change.
Yeah.
So I think that's what happens if you look at the legacy of Quacha House. It was just a place to gather, but it became a space where Walter Borden was, and Art Chris, who was the first executive director of Black United Front. These are just people. Like often, and I think about that as an English teacher, poets were, before they came famous, they were just people who were good with words sent around drinking. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're poets and they became the group of whatever. Like,
Yeah.
but really they were just artistic people sitting around. It's later on that we reflect on them and it was a something. So Quarter House was that, it was a place where people gathered. So as there was some momentum around the African Nova Scotian experience in Nova Scotia, because, as we know, in waves, Black people have been coming to Nova Scotia since the late 1800s.
Yes.
And so by the time you get to 1960, we're talking centuries of being here. And if you look at the map now, and I'm the executive director of African Nova Scotian Affairs, those 52 to 54 Black communities are all put in infertile, distant areas. So if you think about Halifax and Halifax Harbor being the place where mercantile business happened, and at that time it was a seafaring business, the further you were away from Halifax Harbor in 1871, 1890, the further you're away from commerce. So where's Upper Hammonds Plains Pockwalk? Where's East Preston? Where's North Preston? Where's Lucasville? Where's Cherry Brook? These are purposeful places to put people on infertile ground. And I can flip that by saying if the Acadians were expelled from fertile ground because the English wanted that, and so the Cajun population in Louisiana are people from here who were expelled from what? A fertile land, which is the wine industry in 2025. So land is very important. So when you're on land, that's the first start, is who gets to own land, who doesn't get to own land. What can you do with that land? How far is the people that live in that land from a chance to make money? So if you fast forward from the 1870s, early 1900s to the 1960s, there's a whole lot of inequities that happened after intergenerational lack of wealth, right? Because you were put in a place not to prosper. This is my point about you were put in physical spaces not to prosper. So when my parents do come back, it's very clear to them that the school experience for African Nova Scotians, the criminal justice experience, the business experience, who's working and who's not working, like there was severe, just data driven, there were severe inequities. And so when you start to take that on, it's like you're peeling back an onion, or it's those Russian dolls. Like it just, the more you get one, there's another one and another one and another one. And so when you start to speak out and lead that way, I remember our household industry, and I think my ability to speak is partly from listening to a lot of people talk and conversate.
Yeah.
My mom had a round table in the kitchen, and there was often food and drink and a variety of people. There's a misconception it was only white people, Black people at our house. That's not true. It was a mix of people. And so if you were a white person in the space, you just had to be able to handle a conversation around inequity. It didn't have to be Black inequity, but that was the milieu of what was going on. And if you can handle that, you're welcome to come in. But there was food, drink, dance, etc. And I often sat and would watch. That's why I'm okay with the tough conversations, crunchy conversations. Like, I lived that my whole life. I saw people, you'd think they were arguing. Next thing you know, they're hugging each other and dancing it. Like, I saw that up and down of what conversation is. And so one of the things is our house became a gathering spot.
Yeah.
Right? Of people who are lawyers and judges and NDP. I mean, Jeremy Ackerman and some of the leaders I knew, Alexa McDonough, like they were at our house all the time. Like, I mean, that's just part of who was there to conversate and have these. And what's great about that is if you can have it in a safe space, save as Quattro House, then you leave with the sensibility. And sometimes you act on that.
And I want to hone in on that point a little bit, because I think there's an important point there in relation to Joan and the impact that she had and the influence that she has, which is sometimes not seen in the way that the contributions that males may be seen. And so I understand, from reading about Joan, that she was described as the glue that held everything together. And I think that's a very important thing and a very important point, and something that goes to exactly what you just highlighted, which is the collection of all these people from all these different backgrounds and faiths or perspectives, most importantly, coming together to speak to one another to help society function in a better way.
Yes.
And so maybe you can just kind of speak a little bit about Joan and the impact that she had in that way, how she was somebody who, took pieces that may not otherwise fit together or stay together and made them stick together because of her personality, because of who she was and her influence in the community.